The Liberals have asked the UN to block me from attending this year's UN Climate Change Conference in Poland. And guess what? The UN has complied with the Liberals' demands. They've banned me, but I'm going anyway, and I need your help to do it. I'm sure by now you've heard the news. The Liberals are dishing out over $500 million to other media organizations. That's on top of the $1.5 billion to the CBC to plague an unwilling nation with Wendy Mesley's conspiracy theories about conservatives and Rosie Barton's blathering on about how Trump is the root of all things evil. A panel of journalists appointed by the government will be doling out cash and grants and tax credits to quote-unquote trusted media sources. The proposed panel is promised to be independent Liberal appointees, which will probably be exactly the same as Trudeau's so-called independent senators who still vote overwhelmingly with the Trudeau government all the time. The criteria to qualify for this bailout, well, it sounds a lot like the Chinese social credit scoring system, but for journalists this time. We saw the way the Liberals politicized the summer jobs grant program by making organizations sign an attestation to the Liberal Party of Canada's values before they qualified for government grants to employ summer students. Looks like that was just like the prototype program for this big media bailout. Trudeau is basically paying off the failing mainstream media who produce a product nobody wants to pay for anymore to act as de facto press secretaries for the Liberal government, exchanging cash and tax credits for favorable news coverage. It's the end of the free press in Canada, except for us and maybe a handful of other principled news and commentary outlets. Because if you get your paycheck from the government, guess what? Now you work for the government. They own you and every word you write or every comment you make. And it's really the opposite of supporting journalism, because all it does is sully the public's opinion of journalism even more. The government is forcing the public to pay for a product they don't want to, and they taint every word journalists crank out with the stink of the Liberals. Just last week, Trudeau defined himself as the anti-Trump defender of the media in France. Just watch.
It's important to remember that as we move forward on protecting and upholding democratic principles and rights, an informed, independent, and strong media and news sector is extraordinarily important for the strength of our countries.
But while Trudeau was busy championing the value of journalism to an international audience at a press freedom event, his government was making sure that the only skeptical journalists wanting to attend were banned from the United Nations Climate Change Conference in Poland coming up in December. Let me show you my declined application for media accreditation at Environment Minister Catherine McKenna's precious fancy pants UN party. Declined due to complaints about the organization from government delegates at COP22 concerning harassment. Harassment. That's a pretty serious accusation. In Canada, harassment is a crime. But my crime wasn't harassment. My crime in the eyes of the United Nations and Catherine McKenna was daring to ask a Canadian delegate, the press secretary of a Manitoba Indian chief, who was standing in the middle of the conference disparaging the oil sands as toxic and dirty, a question from a taxpayer accountability viewpoint. And then that press secretary ran away from me. Nice to meet you.
I'm Kevin.
Hi, Kevin.
Rachel, you got a card? Yeah. This is my staff.
Great. Okay.
No. Sorry. And for which organization? No, sorry. We're actually not available. We're on our way to another meeting.
Well, he just agreed to speak to us.
Really? Yeah. All right.
But he just agreed to speak to us. Why are you not speaking to us? Is it just us in particular? Is it just us in particular that you don't want to speak to? Is it just
Go to our next meeting now. Thank you.
us though? Like, why don't you want to speak to us? Do I seem unpleasant or was I rude?
I don't understand why you won't speak to us. You were just sitting there speaking to a bunch of people. Are you worried I might ask a difficult question? No? This isn't going to look good, you running away from me. You know that, right?
That's journalism. So my crime was journalism. I asked a question to a person the Canadian taxpayers paid to send to a far-flung conference in an exotic place, and she ran away from me. And then she tattled on me for committing journalism. And so I've been banned at the behest of the Canadian government, likely by Catherine McKenna herself. The UN had complaints about our organization from government delegates. Now, I've never harassed anyone in my life, although I have been the victim of targeted harassment and violence in the course of my work. The UN has never asked to see my footage of the exchange with that delegate or anybody else, or ask for any details from me. They just take these lies and accusations at their word. Why? Because it's a chance to ban a skeptic. It's a serious thing to accuse me of harassment. The government called asking questions to Canadian officials at a newsworthy international summit harassment, something worthy of a lifetime ban at the United Nations conferences. Imagine how lightly the government expects the mainstream media to treat them now to qualify for some of that sweet, sweet Pravda cash Trudeau is making rain from the sky. I don't want Trudeau's bribes. I want the Liberals to get out of my way so I can do my job. The Liberals say they're protecting journalism out of one side of their mouth, while sneaking around in the background and actively censoring this journalist here. I have it there in black and white. The Canadian government did this to me, and it's sending a very loud message to the mainstream media. They better fall in line before they get censored too. But that's not going to stop me from going to Katowice, Poland, to show you exactly what goes on inside these elite UN events. After the UN banned me from going to their conference last year, I think I did some of the best journalism to come out of that entire thing, showing you the hypocrisy that no other journalist either noticed or would dare to report on. And knowing that it is the Canadian government, likely Catherine McKenna herself, since she heads the Canadian delegation to these things, making sure I was banned from this conference, well, it only motivates me, it inspires me, it drives me. You know Catherine McKenna is my muse. There will clearly be things happening in Poland that nobody wants me to see, and there are clearly stories that nobody wants to be told. And I'm just the girl to tell them. The fact that the Canadian government doesn't want me there, well, that's just another reason for me to go, isn't it? But I need your help to do it. I'm going, and I'm taking a cameraman / video editor with me to Katowice, Poland. We always travel cheap. We always eat cheap. We always sleep cheap. And we work really hard when we travel for work, but it will still cost thousands of dollars to send us there. We won't be getting any of Trudeau's $600 million media bailout, and we wouldn't take it anyway. We'd never compromise ourselves in our journalism that way. And we don't get $1.5 billion the way the CBC does. We are crowdfunded by people just like you who see value in what we do here every day. People who want us to tell the other side of this story. So if you can help me do just that, go to Poland and tell the other side of the story the Canadian government has tried to stop me from telling. Go to www.rebelun.com. Help us keep bringing you the news the government doesn't want you to know. For the Rebel.media, I'm Sheila Gunn Reid. Justin Trudeau's Liberals have asked the UN to ban me from attending this year's UN Climate Change Conference in Katowice, Poland. But that's not stopping me from going. In fact, it only motivates me to go there and work harder and tell the other side of the story. If you can help support my trip there and support our unsubsidized independent journalism, go to www.rebelun.com.